picture this. You're scrolling through Facebook Marketplace or maybe Cycle Trader late at night.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. And you click on a listing for a late model sport bike, and I mean, the photos are just flawless.
Showroom condition.
Exactly. The fairings are pristine, the chain is completely spotless, and the factory chicken strips are still clearly visible on the edges of the tires.
Meaning the bike has barely been leaned over.
Yeah, exactly. And then you check the odometer, 800 miles.
Barely broken in.
Right. But you keep scrolling, and suddenly you realize, wait, this isn't a one-off. There's this massive, almost bizarre wave of practically brand new motorcycles just flooding the secondary market.
And they all show, what, fewer than 1,500 miles?
Yeah, exactly.
Once you notice it, it really becomes impossible to unsee. I mean, there are entire ecosystems of classified ads built on these pristine machines.
Oh, for sure.
And they're being offloaded at a massive loss just, months after they rolled off the showroom floor.
Which naturally begs the question, why? Like, why are so many people just bailing out?
It's a fascinating trend.
Really is.
Oh.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the reality of that mass exodus.
The expectation versus reality.
Yeah. We're looking at the often painful psychological, financial, and honestly ergonomic mismatches between the fantasy of motorcycle ownership and the actual reality of living with one.
Right. The clash between what we think riding will be like and the brutal physics of what it actually is.
Exactly. And to get to the bottom of this, we brought together a really fascinating stack of sources for you today.
Lots of good stuff in here.
Oh, absolutely. We're pulling from deep market analysis reports, some brutally honest rider forum discussions where people actually confess their biggest buying mistakes, and some really granular point-of-view riding videos.
The POV videos are incredibly revealing.
They really are. Plus, we have this incredibly insightful piece from Webbike World that details the specific psychology of seller's regret.
That article is a goldmine.
It totally is. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
And I think we should start with the most immediate, just visceral reality check that hits new riders.
Oh, you mean their own anatomy?
Right. Their body's just giving up on them.
Yeah. We can confidently call this the ergonomic torture chamber. I mean, the trap that catches an enormous percentage of these first-year sellers is the physiological difference between a 10-minute test ride and, well, a 1-hour commute.
Because at the dealership, you're just running on pure adrenaline. You throw a leg over like a Kawasaki ZX6R, you crack the throttle, and your brain is just flooding with dopamine.
Oh, completely.
You feel like a MotoGP racer.
Right, and your brain is temporarily masking the mechanical reality of your body positioning. I mean, the ZX6R comes up constantly in these regret forums, and for a very good reason.
It's pretty extreme, right?
It is a dedicated, very aggressive inline-4 super sport. So the geometry, what we call the rider triangle formed by the seat, the pegs, and the handlebars, it's engineered for aerodynamic efficiency and mass centralization on a racetrack.
Which basically means your feet are tucked high and back, and your torso is pitched heavily forward over the tank just to reach those super low clip-on handlebars.
Exactly. Now, consider the physics of that posture during a standard Tuesday morning commute.
Yeah, that sounds awful.
It is. Every single time you break in stop-and-go traffic, the kinetic energy of you and the motorcycle transferring forward, it's being caught entirely by your wrists and your lower back.
Ouch.
And furthermore, because your torso is angled downwards at like roughly 45 degrees, you have to literally crane your cervical spine upward just to see the traffic ahead of you.
And there was this POV video in our sources that perfectly illustrates this entire breakdown.
Oh, the Horsley Hills video.
Yeah. This rider decides to take his ZX6R on an 8.5-hour trip to Horsley Hills. And just honestly, listening to his narration as the miles tick by it is like listening to an anatomical degradation in real time.
He documents it so meticulously, too.
Right. He talks about the lactic acid buildup in his hamstrings from that high peg position.
And the constant lower back spasms. Because, he's supporting his upper body weight without any real core engagement.
And the severe compression in his wrists. He actually brings up a really interesting variable with his gear, too. He's wearing these Alpinestars SP8 leather gauntlets.
Right, which are premium track gloves.
Yeah, which you would think would make things better, but he complains that they were actually amplifying his hand pain.
Well, yeah, because premium bovine or kangaroo leather with Kevlar stitching is just exceptionally stiff out of the box.
So they're fighting him.
Exactly. Before they are broken in, those gloves act almost like compression splints. So when you force your hands into a hyperextended grip on the throttle for literally hours, The stiff leather restricts capillary blood flow.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it dramatically accelerates muscle fatigue in the forearms. Now, compare all of that physiological stress to another highly discussed machine in our sources, the Yamaha MT-09.
Right. Totally different beast. The MT-09 completely flips that rider triangle.
It really does.
You've got these wide, flat, almost dirt bike-style handlebars that just force your torso into a neutral, upright position.
And the leverage you have over the front wheel is entirely different. You're relying on skeletal support rather than just constant muscular tension.
Which explains why riders in the forums just rave about the MT-09. They talk about its torque, sure, but more importantly, they talk about being able to ride for 2 hours without, requiring a chiropractor.
Exactly. I mean, it isn't a flawless touring machine. The lack of fairings and aerodynamics means the wind blast at highway speeds creates a lot of drag on your chest.
Oh, sure, you're basically acting as a sail.
Right. And the factory seat is notoriously flat and awful, which creates these really harsh pressure points on your ischial tuberosity.
Your sit bones, basically.
Yeah, your sit bones. But mechanically speaking, it doesn't weaponize your own body weight against your joints the way a Supersport does.
Okay, let me push back on this logically, though. Because if you are absolutely obsessed with the aesthetic and like the high-revving engine character of a Supersport, can't you just modify the ergonomics?
People certainly try.
Like, to me, it's like buying a tailored suit off the rack. If it pinches in the shoulders, you don't just throw the suit away. You take it to a tailor and have it altered.
Right. Well, the tailored suit analogy works perfectly if you understand that you are buying a suit that was specifically tailored for a marathon sprinter, and you are trying to alter it so you can wear it while lounging on your living room couch.
Okay, that's a fair point.
You can attempt it, sure, but the structural foundations of the garment are just going to fight you every single step of the way.
But riders do try, though. I mean, sources talk about the extreme lengths they go to.
Oh, they absolutely do. We see forum posts detailing the tank bag rest technique, which is wild.
Oh, man. Yeah, explain this one.
So, the golden rule of touring on a Supersport is never wearing a backpack. Adding 20 pounds of dead weight to a spine that is already pitched forward is just a recipe for a herniated disc.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare.
So instead, riders strap a large, rigid piece of luggage directly to the gas tank.
So the bike carries the cargo mass, but the rider also basically uses it as a physical crutch.
Exactly. They literally collapse their chest onto the tank bag while cruising on the highway.
Wow.
It acts as a load-bearing pillar, temporarily transferring the weight of their torso off their wrists and lower back.
That's hilarious and sad at the same time.
Right. We also see riders spending hundreds of dollars on helibar risers, trying to elevate those aggressive clip-ons by just an inch or two to decrease the forward lean angle.
Which, I imagine, inevitably compromises the front-end feel and the whole aerodynamic profile that they bought the bike for in the first place.
It completely defeats the purpose.
Right. You spend all this money trying to blunt the edge of a precision instrument, and the friction of just dealing with it wears you down.
It's exhausting.
And that physical friction feeds directly into the psychological friction, which triggers the next massive reason these bikes hit the market, a complete lifestyle mismatch.
Yes. Buyers frequently purchase a motorcycle for the fantasy life they wish they led, rather than the mundane reality of the life they actually live.
We have a glaring example of this in the forums. A rider logs on asking for buying advice, heavily leaning toward financing a brand new ZX6R.
Oh, I remember this one.
Yeah, and when they ask him about his actual riding use case, he admits his daily commute is exactly 1 mile.
1 mile of surface streets.
That is literally like buying a Formula One card just to drive to the end of your driveway to check the mail.
It makes no sense.
None. By the time the engine oil reaches operating temperature, you're turning the key off. I mean, you'd spend more time putting on your boots, jacket, and helmet than you would actually moving.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how that specific cognitive load, the mental math of the effort required versus the payoff, leads to a well-documented phenomenon known in the community as garage ornament syndrome.
The bike basically becomes a sculpture you just walk past every morning on your way to the car.
Precisely. Because the American ideal of motorcycling is heavily romanticized. The cultural marketing sells us, canyon carving at sunset and open road freedom.
The reality is a little different.
Just a bit. The reality of a daily commute involves checking the radar for pop-up thunderstorms, sweating profusely in heavy Kevlar gear while sitting in gridlock traffic, and just constantly scanning for distracted drivers.
So the friction coefficient of simply leaving the house on a motorcycle is incredibly high compared to just sitting in a climate-controlled car.
And that friction extinguishes the initial fantasy incredibly fast.
There is this deeply vivid anecdote in the research file that perfectly encapsulates this.
Die with a ninja.
Yes, a middle-aged guy, fresh off a divorce, decides to impulse buy a brand new Kawasaki Ninja.
As you do.
Right, so he rides it off the showroom floor, navigates the 20 miles back to his apartment complex, parks it in an outdoor spot, and then never touches it again.
The novelty evaporated the very moment he had to navigate actual traffic.
But it gets worse. He neglected it for so long that during a midsummer heat wave, the asphalt in the parking lot literally softened.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because all the weight of the motorcycle is concentrated on the tiny, maybe 1 square inch footprint of the kickstand. It acted like a hot knife through butter.
The physics of that are brutal.
The kickstand melted straight through the tarmac, the bike tipped over, and was eventually found lying on its side with exactly 23 miles on the odometer.
It's a tragic image. But, I mean, it highlights how quickly the romantic illusion just shatters.
23 miles. That's rough.
But, we have to look at the other side of the coin, too. Because if physical discomfort and logistical friction don't prompt a rapid sale, there's a third factor in our sources that absolutely will: sheer terror.
Ah, yes. The fear factor. We see this primarily when beginners fall into the ego trap.
The classic beginner mistake.
Right. They refuse to start on lightweight, forgiving 300cc machines because they don't want to look like novices. So they convince themselves they can buy a 100 horsepower super sport or a massive 700-pound cruiser and simply, grow into it.
They tell themselves they will just respect the throttle.
Right, which sounds logical in theory.
But it is a very dangerous fallacy because it assumes the rider actually has the fine motor control to modulate that power. When you lack the ingrained muscle memory for clutch friction zones, trail braking, and low-speed balance, the physics of a heavyweight or hyperpowered machine will just ruthlessly expose you.
The sources highlight a crazy story about a beginner rider, a woman weighing maybe 95 pounds, who was absolutely dead set on buying a Yamaha R6 as her first bike.
The R6, that is arguably one of the most uncompromising track-focused bikes ever built for the street.
Yeah, it is not a starter bike.
Not at all. It has a notoriously tall seat height and a very high center of gravity.
And the seller in the forum actually tried to talk her out of handing over the cash because she could barely touch the asphalt with the very tips of her boots.
Which is terrifying, because if you can't flat-foot a motorcycle, you are relying entirely on perfect balance to keep the machine upright at a stop.
Right.
Once a bike with a high center of gravity tips past just a few degrees off-center, a 95-pound rider has zero mechanical leverage to stop it from falling. Gravity simply wins.
And gravity did win. She dropped that R6 3 times in the first 2 weeks.
Destroying the fairings in the process, I'm sure.
Oh, completely. And completely shattering her own confidence, too.
It's sad, really.
It is. But honestly, the award for the most terrifying purchase in the research has to go to the guy who bought the modified Honda CBR 600 RR.
Oh, man. This story is something else.
This buyer had zero riding experience, like no dirt bikes as a kid, no MSF safety courses. His entire education consisted of watching YouTube videos.
Which is horrifying when you look at the specifications of the machine he was buying.
Yeah. The CBR was heavily modified for the track. It had launch control, a quick shifter, and a quick-turn throttle tube.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of why a quick-turn throttle on a beginner bike is a complete recipe for disaster.
Please do.
A standard factory throttle tube has a linear cam profile, meaning you have to twist your wrist quite far to reach wide-open throttle. It provides a natural safety buffer.
Which is very forgiving for a new rider.
Exactly. But a quick-turn throttle alters that cam geometry. Just a millimeter of wrist movement translates to a massive intake of air and fuel at the throttle bodies.
So if a beginner with a stiff, tense wrist hits a pothole,
The jolt transfers through their arm, they involuntarily twist the grip a fraction of an inch, and the bike violently surges forward. It's what we call whiskey throttle.
that sounds terrifying.
It is. And then you combine that with a quick shifter, which cuts engine ignition for milliseconds so you can upshift without even using the clutch. And you are essentially removing all the mechanical buffers that forgive sloppy inputs.
So this buyer, with zero experience, tests this hypersensitive track weapon in a parking lot
Without a helmet.
without a helmet, repeatedly stalling it in first gear. Then he just hands over the cash and casually announces he's going to ride it 3 hours down the interstate to get it home.
The sensory overload he would have experienced on that interstate on-ramp is just unimaginable. I mean, the wind noise, the vibration, the hypersensitive throttle input, the sheer vulnerability of being surrounded by 4,000-pound SUVs at 70 miles per hour.
It's a lot.
That level of fear literally paralyzes your physical inputs. He somehow survived the ride home, miraculously, parked it in his garage, and immediately listed it for sale. The terror outweighed the fantasy in a single afternoon.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because it's easy to point the finger at, like, young kids chasing adrenaline on sport bikes. But the sources show the exact same dynamic playing out with a completely older demographic.
The retirement dreamers.
Yes. You have these 60-year-old retirees who have never ridden a day in their lives, deciding it's finally time to live out their easy rider fantasy.
Midlife or late life crisis.
Right. They walk into a dealership and just pay cash for massive 700-pound-plus Harley-Davidsons or Indian Cruisers.
And managing the mass of an 1800cc engine block requires an entirely different set of physics than riding a bicycle.
Oh, absolutely. One specific rider in our sources bought a brand new 1800cc Indian Chief Dark Horse.
A beautiful bike, but a massive one.
Yeah. And the reality of living with that behemoth crushed him almost instantly. First, he was plagued with all these mechanical gremlins like loose clutch cables right from the factory, random check engine lights, parasitic draws constantly killing the battery.
Annoying, but manageable.
Right, but the real issue is simply moving the thing.
Yeah, that's the real trap with heavyweight cruisers. Because at highway speeds, the gyroscopic forces of those massive wheels keep the bike incredibly stable. It basically wants to stand up straight on its own.
But navigating a gas station parking lot at 3 miles per hour?
Exactly. The gyroscopic effect is completely gone. The steering geometry, the trail, makes the front wheel aggressively want to flop inward, so you have to constantly balance engine revs against a slipping clutch while dragging the rear brake, just to keep the chassis tensioned and upright.
It's an active balancing act. And if you panic and grab the front brake while the handlebars are turned even slightly at 3 mile 4.
The front suspension dives, the weight transfers violently to the side, and all 700 pounds are slamming into the pavement before you can even get your foot off the peg.
Yep. The sheer physical exhaustion of just wrestling that bear every single time he pulled out of his driveway completely broke him. He surrendered and sold his dream machine at a massive financial loss with only 1,200 miles on the clock.
Which perfectly brings us to the final, unavoidable hurdle in the life cycle of new ownership.
The money.
Right. Even if you buy a motorcycle that fits your ergonomics perfectly, even if it perfectly suits your daily commute, and even if you actually possess the skills to ride it confidently, there is still the financial reality and the cruelty of the secondary market.
The financial cold shower. People look at the MSRP of a bike and think, that's the finish line, when really it's just the down payment on the lifestyle.
The hidden operational costs are staggering. Just take insurance, for example. Insurance actuaries have decades of data proving exactly how likely a 20-year-old on a 600cc sport bike is to total that machine.
Very likely.
Extremely. Consequently, the annual premium for full coverage on a financed sport bike can sometimes exceed the actual cash value of the motorcycle itself.
That's insane. And then you have to factor in $1,000 for a quality Snell-rated helmet, an armored jacket, gloves, and riding boots.
Which you absolutely need.
Yeah. And you factor in premium high-octane fuel and the fact that soft compound sport touring tires might be completely bald and need replacing after just 4,000 miles.
The monthly ledger quickly turns deep red, and that financial stress forces a quick sale. But interestingly, our sources also track the inverse problem.
Wait, really? What's the inverse?
It isn't always riders running out of money. Sometimes the quick turnover is driven by riders with massive disposable income who suffer from what the community calls upgraditis.
Ah, the tech chasers.
Exactly. They buy a flagship adventure bike or superbike, and 8 months later, the manufacturer announces the next year's model.
In the new model, features like a TFT dashboard with Bluetooth integration, or maybe the integration of a 6-axis IMU for cornering ABS.
Yes, which, to be fair, fundamentally changes the safety profile of the bike.
Also,
Well, traditional ABS prevents wheel lockup in a straight line, but if you grab a handful of front brake while heavily leaned over in a corner, traditional ABS will either forcefully stand the bike up and send you wide right into oncoming traffic, or it'll just wash the front tire out entirely.
yikes. So what does cornering ABS do?
Cornering ABS uses an inertial measurement unit to calculate the bike's pitch, roll, and yaw over 100 times a second. It modulates the brake pressure dynamically based on the exact lean angle of the motorcycle.
That's incredible technology.
It really is. So for a tech-obsessed rider, the moment that feature drops, their current 8-month-old bike feels completely obsolete and they immediately trade it in.
Wow. We also see beginners who actually made the smart choice, right? Starting on a 300cc bike.
Mhm.
But they ride so aggressively that they master the friction zone in a few months, get tired of maxing out the RPMs just to pass a semi-truck on the highway, and just rush back to the dealer for a 600cc upgrade.
Yeah, that happens a lot too. If we connect this to the bigger picture, all of this rapid churn, whether it's from fear, physical pain, or upgraditis, it creates a highly specific emotional toll that the Web Bike World article brilliantly identifies as seller's regret.
I found that part so fascinating because we hear about buyer's remorse all the time, but seller's regret seems far more haunting.
It really is, because a motorcycle isn't an appliance. It isn't a refrigerator or a toaster. It is an intensely emotional purchase that owners pour their time, their identity, and literally their skinned knuckles into customizing.
Oh, for sure.
The article discusses the endowment effect, where we overvalue things we have a deep personal connection to. Riders will sell a heavily customized, rare machine like a Ducati GT1000 or a BMW HP2 Enduro for totally logical financial reasons.
But the logic fades.
Exactly. The logic fades, and they spend years kicking themselves because that unique mechanical bond is irreplaceable. And the secondary market never, ever reimburses you for the emotional labor or the raw cash spent on aftermarket exhausts and suspension tuning.
No, the market does not care about your feelings. There is one particular anecdote in those sources that just hits like an emotional gut punch.
Oh, I think I know which one you're talking about.
The SV650 guy.
Yes, that one's rough.
So this rider owned a beautiful Suzuki SV650, and he treated this thing like absolute royalty, kept it on paddock stands in a climate-controlled garage, maintained the chain religiously, and even clay-barred the paint to remove microscopic contaminants.
It was the literal definition of a mechanical labor of love.
Totally. So he eventually decides to sell it, just to clear space for a new project. The guy who answers the ad shows up at his house driving a completely gutted Dodge minivan.
The minivan story, it perfectly illustrates the horror of the secondary market.
It really does. The buyer hands over the cash and then literally lays this pristine clay-barred motorcycle flat on its side, resting on some moldy couch cushions in the back of the van, and just drives away.
I cringe every time I think about it.
It's so bad. And because they lived in the same city, the original owner would occasionally drive past the buyer's house. And he would see his beloved SV650 parked outside in the dirt, rotting in the rain and the winter snow, barely covered by a cheap, flapping tarp.
Heartbreaking.
He wrote that it felt exactly like he had sold a well-trained, beloved pet to an abuser.
It is a visceral, sickening image for any enthusiast. You realize that you haven't merely transacted a piece of machinery, you've transferred stewardship of something you cared for deeply to someone who views it as completely disposable.
Have you ever sold something you truly loved? Something you poured your energy into, only to watch the next person completely ruin it?
The worst feeling.
It genuinely makes you wonder why we ever let these machines out of our garages in the first place.
It is the ultimate paradox of ownership, you know? We preserve them perfectly, only to eventually hand them over to chaos.
Yeah, that's incredibly well said. So we've dissected the shattered lumbar spines of the supersport commuters, the melted kickstands of the garage ornaments, the sheer white-knuckle terror of the overbiked beginners, and the crushing financial and emotional traps of seller's regret.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. So what does this all mean for you? It means that while the act of buying a motorcycle is driven by raw emotion and romanticized marketing, successfully living with one year after year demands incredibly strict physical, mental, and financial discipline.
True. But I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Something that wasn't explicitly spelled out in our sources, but it emerges pretty clearly when you look at the macro-level data.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What is it?
Think about this. What if this massive secondary market of practically brand new, low-mileage bikes isn't actually a tragedy? What if it is a necessary symbiotic ecosystem?
Oh, I like where this is going.
Hear me out. These impulse buyers, the terrified beginners, the tech chasers who trade in their bikes before the first valve clearance check, They are essentially performing a vital public service for the rest of the riding community.
Oh, because of the depreciation.
Exactly. They are the ones absorbing the massive financial blow of new bike depreciation. They are the ones paying those exorbitant dealer setup fees and freight charges.
Wow, yeah.
They are storing these machines in pristine condition in their climate-controlled garages, acting as temporary custodians just to eventually pass them on to dedicated, lifelong riders for pennies on the dollar.
That is an amazing point.
So the next time you are scrolling through those classifieds late at night and you see a 1,000-mile bike for sale, don't just see a failed dream. See a heavily subsidized opportunity.
That is an absolutely brilliant reframe. It transforms this whole graveyard of broken dreams into a heavily discounted gold mine for the dedicated rider who knows exactly what they're looking for.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us as we unpack these sources today. We really hope you take that perspective with you the next time you're browsing the classifieds. Keep exploring, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.